Okay, I believe we're live. Hi, gents. Thank you for joining me again. After a very exciting finals the past weekend, we had the finals live in Sandton in the Bidvest Bank building, and we had around about 20 people competing, and we've got our top 10, and we've got our winner that goes to Vegas. So very exciting times, and yeah, thanks for joining me again on an evening like this, talking about one of our favorite topics. Um, I wanted to quickly just share. So let's see if I can quickly just do that so that we can maybe share with the participants a part of what we saw on Saturday. So yeah, on Saturday we had the finals of the Microsoft Excel World Championship South Africa. So the first local chapter to crown a new champion, and our champion was Michael van Skalkwijk. In the second place we had Franco Bosman. Third place we had Gareth Watson. Fourth place Peter Pinar, our own collegiate challenge champion, and and then fifth place we had Adam Jacobson, and then sixth, seventh, and eighth we had three ladies. We had Mitzi Tianet and Rachel Lee in those places. So very good representation in the top 10, and then in ninth place we had Jan Hofman from Stellenbosch University, and in 10th place we had a trainee from PwC called Mikhail Perumal. So very good representation there, and very proud of our finalists. I think they did really well. Yeah, Jason, I don't know, maybe if you have anything that you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I said it on LinkedIn already. I mean, it was a phenomenal showing by all the participants, and I think I'm probably a little bit harsh on the cases when we test them in terms of where I think people are going to land, just based on where I sort of got to. And I mean, I think the three of us generally compete pretty well on the global competition, and so it's a good sense of where the leaders are going to be. And I remember saying, I think for all three cases, I'd be surprised if guys got close to the end in the 30 minutes. And in every single one of the cases, I think the top guys were getting close to the end, and it was a phenomenal showing. And I think just demonstration of the way that the South African cohort of participants are upping their game, and like are really able to compete on the global scale at the moment. It was like phenomenal performance, and properly nail biting on Saturday, going into round three with 131 points separating the top five people. It's like I was the sort of anecdote I was using on Saturday was like, that's like half a level. If you can get half a level out ahead of someone else, that's the difference between 5 and 1 to go to Vegas. I mean, we couldn't have scripted it better. Um, and it was a phenomenal showing, and really big congratulations to Michael.
Yeah, and as you said, I think third and fourth, or second and third, I think there were two or 3 points between them, and I mean, to put that into perspective, a case is 1,250 points. So in total, we have 3,700. Well, yeah, 750 points up for grabs, and 3 points were separating them, and so it's insane.
Yeah, and
Um,
you think about Adam, who, devastatingly, I suppose, for him, went from first to fifth after the third round,
yeah,
but was, I believe, seconds away from pasting his round five answer in the first case.
yeah.
And all of the what ifs kind of come up, and I mean, heartbreaking stuff. But I mean, really a phenomenal showing by all of them. It was really a proper representation across the board.
Yeah, and as you said, I think the participants really they really performed above what we expected,
Absolutely.
and that made us very proud. Um, we did put out some of our best cases yet, in my opinion. Very
Mm.
interesting cases, very challenging cases, and for us, we felt this is challenging, it had to be because we knew we had good competitors, but we didn't know that they were going to show that well. And luckily, we didn't have any full marks across any of the cases, but it became very close on the second case. I think 2 participants were 1 bonus question away from full marks. So amazing to do that under that pressure within half an hour. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So let me quickly just touch on the sponsors. So without these sponsors, we wouldn't have been able to have held this competition. So we had Bidvest Alice or Bidvest Advisory Services, the company that I work for, as our main sponsor. We used their offices, and they also paid for most of the catering, and they're also paying all the cash prizes. So a massive thank you to them for their support from the very beginning, since we started with the South African Excel Championships, which is now the MEWC South Africa. So thanks for that. And then Roger and the team from App Venture for sponsoring our amazing desk pads. I'm sporting my desk pad currently. Thanks for that. Excellent. And then CPD Campus, they're paying for the actual flight tickets to Vegas for Michael. So big thanks to Anton and Karen from Veik from CPD Campus. Then the team, Dan and Avi from Excel Academy, they're also sponsoring some of the prizes for us, and then my BI as well. So thank you to all of our sponsors. Without you guys, it wouldn't have been possible. So let's talk about the case at hand. Jason, maybe you should explain to us where this came from, because it was a very unexpected case. Very nice. I like the African outfit and everything. But how did you come up with Mkhulu the Zulu?
I'm a little bit hesitant to give the original idea of where this came from.
Don't give the original idea.
I still want to do that one. So there was some other vague reference that sort of sparked the idea, and when I was playing around with setting up the case, I kind of it kind of evolved over time. But actually, what kind of started driving in this direction was my son has got a little like logic puzzle game that you play with, and you've got a little man and you've got little robot things that you put on a board, and it's it's probably a 5x5 square if I remember correctly, and you put like a robot somewhere, and then the man can like hit the robot, and he can move as far as he can up to the robot or to the edge of the board, and then he turns and he goes the other direction. Now this was kind of along that vein, although you sort of land on the item that we placed here, but that was kind of the thinking, and this idea sort of merged then with the other vague thing I'm not going to talk about because I still want to do it one day. And it really just evolved, and I wanted to bring in something that was maybe somewhat familiar to the FMWC slash MEWC family, and so I sort of had a little bit of a play on Lana Banana. That's why I mentioned that Mkhulu the Zulu doesn't care much for bananas. It was a little bit of an Easter egg in that description for the global guys. But sort of a similar vibe. You got a bit of a map and some icons, and you've got someone moving around the map.
So Lana Banana was, I think, a case by Harry Gross, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And a very famous case.
Yeah.
And very simple in instructions. And it was basically a monkey who ate bananas, and she moved around a map very similar to this, but not as simple as you'd think to actually solve it in half an hour. Well, for me at least. But a very famous case, and I think there's actually merchandise that they've put out there for Lana Banana. So maybe we should do some merch for Mkhulu Zulu as well.
Yeah, I initially wanted to make some sort of cousin of Lana Banana in Africa, but the sort of closest thing was going to be a baboon, and I thought that wouldn't be very befitting of our African heritage. So I thought, let's go something a little bit more wise, and Anyway, so then the
Like
the
it.
wise owl sort of evolved into like reading books and stuff, and it just kind of happened. But yeah.
Cool.
Anyway, the idea is that you move around a map. You fly around. You can fly up to 3 cells at a time. But if you hit a book or a paper in your path, you stop on that item and read it, and then your owl intelligence, your OQ, doubles or quadruples depending on the item that you've landed on, and you kind of move around the board a bit, and that's the crux of it.
So I think instructions wise it's pretty simple, but to actually properly model it, I think there's some challenges, especially the fact that when you start on a book or a paper, you read it immediately, but you still move.
Mm-hmm.
So on your starting move, you could actually read up to two different icons, if I can call it that.
Yep.
And then it's the 3 cell limit, unless you hit a paper or a book or the edge of the screen. So there's a couple of variables that you need to model for. But maybe we can hear from Steyn. Steyn, how do you personally start or approach a case like this if you see it when you see it the first time?
Well, I think have a look at all the pages, like because you see the description, but also look at what the map looks like so that you have an idea of how you should work towards and stuff.
I think that's a good tip, and I think the map in this case had a blank row at the top and it had a blank column on the left. So there's certain things that you can, and I mean, Jason, you were nice enough to actually give the column numbers and the column references and the row numbers. So unless someone knows about the address function or whatever, they can actually rebuild the addresses. And if they don't know the indirect function, maybe they can use references that way. But yeah, so I guess it depends on your experience level how you actually attempt this. But maybe I can just show a couple of things around how I structured it myself, and I'll maybe take us through one or two questions quickly. So I tested this version. It was an older version, so it looks a little bit different in the end version, but but it still applies for the questions I'm going through. So I think one of the things that you should, well, so what we did for the participants is we gave them the description, so we actually saved them the time to actually read this part, which I think is a nice thing. And I think when you participate in the global competition, that's also something that is given to you. So you don't necessarily need to spend much time reading this anymore. And then, Jason, you were nice enough to actually give the icons as well as the names of the icons, as well as the symbols, which wasn't actually necessary. But I guess when that happens, just be aware of it or just know about it. Keep it in the back of your mind. And then you also gave the multiplier. So on my side, what I did was I immediately went and I renamed these to icons, and I renamed those to, I don't think I did. So I think I just renamed the multipliers by multipliers. So immediately that becomes something I can look up. It becomes a constant reference that I can use, and that was sort of one of the starting steps that I did. What I also did was I renamed the block of the library itself. So this actual block, I renamed that to library. And that way I can reference it and I don't need to lock any cell references in the future. So just a couple of tips for those newbies out there. And then I think one of the nice things that you did was you actually asked the current character length of the paper icon. So what a lot of people want to do is they want to get stuck in level 1, but they never actually read things like this. And what's nice about this is it's a very simple formula. It's a very simple function where you can just go, give me the length of P18, which is the paper icon, and that immediately tells you the length is 2. And because it's 2 characters, you immediately know how to actually split out this items read column in there. And I think a lot of people really got stuck here because they haven't seen characters that are more than 2 of length in the past. So that's something, I guess, to note here. We'll cover those soon, and guys, please interject if you want to add anything or if I'm missing anything. But we'll unpack how you strip that out soon. And then so I think the first 3 bonuses, I mean, we're talking about 90 points was really pretty simple to get. Maybe I can just show how I also got how many books are there in the library. So in the library tab, what I did was I did a 2 col of the whole library, and your third or your second parameter is basically what do you want to ignore. So you can ignore blanks, errors, and errors. I find myself actually selecting blanks and errors by default, and that basically removes anything that's in between the icons, so that you just have a list of all the icons in the library running down, and then it's just a basic count if function. So you can just go count if books, and maybe just another tip for the newbies out there, you can actually go count if, and then you can select your range. So I'm going to click there, and I'm just going to go Control Shift down, and that'll do the hash reference for the dynamic array or the spilled reference, and then comma, and then the criteria that I'm looking for is I want to count was it books. So what I typically do is I just go and select a book there, and you can double click in that parameter there, and you'll see at the top it gives you a little IntelliSense icon showing you what it will equate to, or what it will calculate it to. But if you press F9, it basically calculates that part of the function for you, and that becomes a static reference then. So when I close that, I will always be referring to books there. So just a quick and easy way to extract an icon if you don't have it separated yet. So I guess I just wanted to share that, and that's how we knew that there were 70 books in the library. And then the next question I think was also very simple. If Mkhulu starts in cell X4 and flies down all the way to the border of the grassland library, how many papers would you read? So basically the same function as you would use for the second question, but your reference now just needs to be X4 down. And I just did it manually. So I basically just went and said, well, not really manually, but did the same thing, but the reference is X4 to the bottom. And then I just did the same extraction for paper, which I could have gotten from here as well. So so that was basically 3 bonus questions done. You could have had 90 points, and I think you could have done that in maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Gents, anything that you want to add to those 3 bonus questions, maybe?
Just to put, I did bonus B the same way that you did bonus C. So I guess to shave 10 seconds off of bonus B, you can do the COUNTIF on a 2D array as well. So you didn't have to do the 2-col COUNTIF first, although I think you've given a lot of great tips on 2-col, ignore errors, COUNTIF with the F9 and stuff like that. But you can do the COUNTIF directly onto the 2D array. So just it's the same approach that you did for bonus C. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hold on. For some reason, I thought that would have failed. I don't know why back then when I tested it. It was probably late night, and I didn't think about
funny
that.
enough, when I wrote the formula, I thought, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? I can't remember. Then I did it, and I was like, okay, it works.
Because COUNTIF doesn't always play well with with dynamic arrays and with difficult references. But yeah, cool. Okay, so I guess those are the first 3 bonuses, and then for level 1, like I said, I think the biggest challenge here was basically just to strip out these icons. And if we had done level or bonus A, we would have known that we need to look at or reference icons that are more than than one character in length. And I think it's a difficult thing for people to understand. But luckily, both of them were 2. If one of them was 1, it would have been even more difficult. But yeah, so both of them were 2. So basically, what I did here was, and I saw one of the participants actually going to his or her sheet of functions, and it was a labyrinth of functions that they usually use in these cases. And he went and he copied it out, and I think it was one of the male participants. He copied it back into this, and it broke, and it was like, why is it breaking? And I saw the frustration. But usually, what you would do, because I mean, if this was delimited by commas, for instance, it would have been very simple, because then you could have just used text split. You could have used the delimiter, but in this case, there's no delimiter between them. So basically, you just have a string, and like we said, each of them has so they handle like one character, but of length, they are 2 of length. So what we do to strip things out like this is we use the mid function, because we want to extract text from the middle of something, and the text that we want to extract is actually this text. The start number, well, we'd want to start at 1, and in this case we know there's 2, so we want to extract 2 at a time. If I do that, I'm just going to extract the first one. And if I had gone and said, you know what, give me a sequence, and I know there's 5 of them, so give me 5, I'm going to go columns, give me 5 in a sequence, then I could have gone and said, you know what, so start at that number, and I could have gone and said, give me that spilled dynamic array. And then you'd see, but something's off, because this is blank, and this is blank, and this is blank. So it's only extracting every second one. And that's then the other clue is that your sequence actually needs to jump. So because the second part of this character is actually number 2. So if I jump my sequence, if I step my sequence by 2, then I'll actually go and extract the numbers. So I want to look at the first character, the third character, the fifth character, the 7th character, because this total length of this is actually not 5 but 10. I hope I've explained it well, but in the end, my function was the mid of that text, and then I used the sequence function inside that to say, give me the length of that one, divided by 2, because I want 5 of them, and I wanted you to start at the first character, step by 2, and extract 2 at a time. And I think this is something that you learn once, but once you figured it out, it's very helpful to have that knowledge. So what I then did the first time I did it was I basically just used an XLOOKUP to look up these characters in my icon set and return my multipliers. So basically take my icons, return my multipliers, and I've got those numbers. And like we've said before, very simple. If you build out these steps, in this case, I just then said, okay, so my starting IQ or OQ in this case for Mkhulu was 32. And if I multiply that by 2, it becomes 64. And if I multiply that by the next one, so use 64 multiplied by 4, then it goes up to 256, then 512, then 248, then 4096, and that matches my example. When I did it the second time, or when I just checked the answers the second time, I was like, this is the perfect time for a reduce. And I think this was just a good segue to actually talk about reduce, because it's actually a very simple solution once you actually understand what reduce does. But if you have an array that you want to apply the same function to repetitively and get the end answer of, then reduce is your function. And if you want all all of these answers in a row, then scan would be your answer. So I guess I just wanted to quickly show what the reduce would look like. So if I go and say reduce, then basically you'll see that the explanation says that it reduces an array to an accumulated value by applying a lambda function to each value and returning the total value in the accumulator. So this is exactly what we're trying to do in this function. Is we've got an initial value. The initial value is the starting OQ. And then my array that I want to apply that to is my extracted array that I've got here. So I've got my five icons, papers, and books, and then the function that I want to apply to them is a lambda. And in this lambda, the only trick to the reduce is to remember what is the first parameter and what's the second parameter. So the first parameter is also always your starting value, and your starting value ultimately becomes your ultimate value. So that's the actual accumulator. So A is your accumulator, and then B is your array. So B would refer to J55 hash, which is your 5 icons. And then basically what I just wanted to do was I wanted to say multiply A, so multiply that starting OQ by what I look up in B. So what returns from B, which is a paper in the first iteration. My lookup array is my icons, and my return array is my multipliers. So essentially, I just want to multiply my multipliers with my accumulator, which is A, and that's it. That is the whole function. So and it works. It works in such a way that I can drag it over there, and I can pull it down, and it solves for the whole level. So in one step, I basically reproduced all the steps. And I mean, you could have done the split and everything inside it, which just goes to show the power of this. If you are comfortable with this function, it's actually a very valuable function to practice. And for those of you that are intermediate or that are more advanced, I highly recommend it, in especially these kinds of cases where you have a reproducible function. And I'm sure once Dim releases his walkthrough video, I'm sure there's going to be some scans and reduces in there. I guess I just wanted to show the scan as well. And like I said, the scan would just basically give you step by step the numbers as they go. The nice thing is if you build it as a scan initially, then you can track your steps as you go to debug. Instead of just getting the final answer, reduce basically just gives you the final answer. So just wanted to show that. It's been a while since I've shown a bit more advanced functions, but I think in this case, definitely the best way to attempt or approach this level, even though it's considered the easy first step. I think this is something that you can easily build on. And as you can see, it's very powerful. Guys, any inputs there? Anything that I missed?
Well, I also tried to extract it, but I used a one character in my mid. So I got empty strings, so I wasn't able to split like that. But what I did do instead then is I took the string and then replaced the characters so that I could compare the original length of the original string compared to the length of the string with the character removed. And then I just had to remember to divide it by 2.
Okay, yeah, interesting.
I did the same as Steyn. I calculated how many papers and how many books there were by doing a sort of a length and a substitute length to just tell you how many have gone. And then actually, I think that your approach is very helpful for the subsequent. If you set this up in level 1, it's going to help you a lot in the later rounds as you need to start accumulating stuff. But for level 1, you could just mathematically quite easily say 32 as a starting number multiplied by 2, which is the value of the papers to the
Yeah.
power of how many papers there
To
are,
the power of 3 in this
multiply
case,
by 4 to the power of whatever. And so that's how, I don't know, Steyn, if you had a similar approach, but if I had 3 papers and 2 books, it's 32 times 2 to the power 3 times 4 to the power 2. And that also works to get the answers for level 1, but then that only gets you level 1. That doesn't help you at all in the future. But it gets level 1 out pretty quickly without having to sort of think it's more a maths problem than a complicated Excel function problem. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, I like that approach. Very interesting approach, and I think for those that missed it, the substitute principle is basically if I've got the length of the string, and I know that it's 10, and I take the substituted string and I basically remove any of the, let's say, papers. Let me just lock that one. So if I remove papers and I basically replace it with a blank string, then what did I do now?
Yeah, that's right. So if you take the length of that,
I need to take the length of that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Then I'm left with just the books.
that was a
I
good.
need to
You
take the
showed you've
length.
got the 2 books left, and the length of that is 4.
It's 4.
Yeah.
So that means if I divide that by 2, then I've got 2 books.
So
Basically.
it's 2
No.
books, correct? Yeah, 2 books, or you could,
Well, you need to take
or you could do 10 minus 4 divided by 2 is 6, which gives you 3 papers because you
gives you 3
substituted the papers.
Correct. Okay,
So yeah, you guess you could do it either way. There's only 2 icons here, so you could do it either way.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool, that's helpful. Okay, so let's just start and dig into level 2. So the question of level 2 is asking if Mkhulu starts in the given cell, so that's the given cell, and flies down all the way to the border of the Grassland Library. How many items, both papers and books, would he read? Ignore the three cell limit. You can take as many trips as needed to reach the border. Okay, so basically what I did, my approach, and I think there's a simpler way to do this definitely, but I just wanted to unpack the functions that I used. So I used the sum, account if, an offset, and an indirect. And I know that I could have done it simpler, but that was what I went with. That was the natural, intuitive step that I went with. So I just wanted to show how I basically start my indirect always. So the indirect is basically a way to reference a cell with its text value, if I can call it that. So if I'm going to refer to equals the library N5, then I usually go to library N5 like that, and I go and press enter. And that's going to just return that library N5 of mine. Okay, so that's the indirect. That's just the cell reference. If I go and wrap that in indirect, so I take that reference and I put it in inverted commas like this, then basically I'm going to get the same value. So this is basically saying that is the text reference of that address. Now if I remove this N5, if I cut that out and I concatenate that with the ampersand operator, and I add this little N5 to it, the actual reference, then it becomes dynamic. So now I'm referring to N5, but if I copy it down, I'm referring to different cells. And basically that's how the indirect function works. Okay, so that makes it dynamic, and that makes it so that I can actually refer to those cells in that way. And then the offset function has many abilities, but if I go and say offset, okay, so let's just say, so basically offset returns a reference to a range that is a given number of rows and columns from a given reference. So that's exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm looking for everything down from that location. So the reference that I have is that reference of mine, that library N5. So it's basically my indirect function that I need to put in there. So let's just do that. Let's take that indirect function, and I'll just copy. I'll just copy that, and I'll put it inside the offset. So that's my reference. And then I don't want to move any columns or rows. So the rows and the columns parameters basically gives me the ability to move my reference up, down, left, or right by any numbers of rows or columns. I'm not going to move it because that's the reference that I want to use. So I'm not going to use those parameters. And then there's two optional parameters in the end. The one is height, the other one is width. So width would be columns, height would be rows. In this case, I want to go down all the way to the border of the grassland library. Now I know that it's 40 by 40 from the description initially, but in this case, it doesn't matter if I go 100 or 1,000 down, because I just want to go down. So that's something that I could have done. You could have been clever about it, and I know that Steyn and Jason were clever about how to calculate, because you could have gone and said the row of my reference less, or 40 less the row of my reference, or something like that. So you could have done that. No need for that. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to show, because it's going to give me a spill error now because it's spilling into something else. It keeps on giving me spill errors, but I just wanted to show. So this is basically just going to give me everything from N5 down all the way to the end of the map, which is basically around about there. But it goes all the way to 100 cells. And that's my offset function that I just wanted to show. And then from that, I can basically count. I can count if, and basically, let me just show what I did. So I basically just said, count if it finds icons. And I wrapped it in a sum, because the COUNTIF in this case is going to count both icons. So it's going to return for me 2. If I don't wrap it in the sum, let me just show you what it does. If I don't wrap it in the sum, it basically gives me the count of the one and the other one, the paper and the book, or the book and the paper. I think it's the paper and the book in that order. And then basically I just wrap that into a sum, so that it basically sums those two numbers up. So that's how I did level 2. Gents, any other approaches that you had?
Well, go to that string you had there, that long
Okay,
drop
sorry.
down.
Do that. Now Steyn's going to tell me why I was stupid again, and why
No,
I
not
could have, how I
stupid,
could have
just a
done
different.
it a lot simpler. Yes, which one?
The one
String?
to the right, that where you
The
went
offset,
100 down.
Yeah.
So I just wrapped that in a concat, which then gave me a string of the books and the pages, and then I was able to just copy the formulas from level 1.
From above, yeah. That's a good idea. So if you've done that, then basically you can use the same logic as you had in the previous, in level 1. I like that approach. Makes it a lot simpler. Yeah. I like it.
Renier, you and I did basically exactly the same thing. I just, instead of doing the COUNTIF in the formula, I had a map with ones and zeros on it that I created, which I'll put up when I do level 4 or 5, whatever later. But sum, offset, indirect, exactly the same. It sort of feels like the logical approach to get the range, the offset. But what I have to force myself to say whenever we do an indirect offset, is the first thing that I tell the guys at the office to never ever use, because those functions are volatile and slow your models down, and they're horrible to audit and stuff like that. But for these kinds of cases, they're amazing, and it's really cool to know about them. But yeah, in the real world, there are better options.
Yeah, so I agree with you, but I think to be a well-rounded Excel user, I think you should know how to use them, because there are use cases, and it might not be a modeling use case, but it might be another use case that you run into, and then you just realize, okay, now here comes my time to actually use this, and I agree. Volatile functions like rand between and indirect, and well, anything that recalculates every time a cell changes is considered volatile, and a volatile function is bad practice to actually deploy. So yeah, Steyn, you want to take us through level 3?
Okay. You see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So what I did is I have a let formula that I created which builds up my indirect. So I provide them with the sheet name, the first cell I want to copy from, or the range from, and then my range to. And then it builds like almost like a indirect like this. And then I can just ask it to provide me the result from that indirect. So then I used it to calculate my starting position to determine if there's a book or page that I should get. And then for a second, at first, I used it to get the sequence there, but you stop at the first book or page you hit. So then I just put in a left one to see if there's in my first, the free moves, if there's a book or page inside that, and then it gives my left. And then I combined the two of them, and then I just counted them and multiplied it by the starting value.
So the question on this level was you start in one cell
flight.
and you have one flight. You move three
Yes.
cells down. And the question is, do you hit a book or a paper somewhere in there? And then what does your owl intelligence go up by? Is it 2 or 4 or nothing? I guess that's the objective. And so Steyn, you finding whether there's a book or a paper, and then you're multiplying it.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. I was pretty similar. Trying to actually think now if there was something that I did differently. So I think one of the nuances you had to check if the first cell had anything, because then you were potentially multiplying by two things rather than one thing. So there was that sort of one nuance, but then also taking the first icon that you hit, which is what you did with the left function there, which was cool. I did a lookup to see if I hit an icon and then pulled it through, but otherwise much the same. Cool. All right. Shall I do 4?
Yes.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, sorry. You can go through level 4.
Sorry, were you wanting to add something on 3? Were you?
No. I think I did it very similarly, so I don't think there's anything to add.
Okay. All right. So then, level 4, you start on a given cell and you fly right, so to the right-hand side of the map. And the question is, how many flights does it take you to reach the border? And sort of conceptually, if it's just 3 cells per flight, it's not just the number of cells to get to the border divided by 3, because the nuance is if you hit a book or a paper in between, that chops your flight short. And so you can get to the scenario where, like if we started, for example, here on R8, your first flight is only 2 characters long. Your second flight is 3 characters long, and the paper doesn't actually interrupt that. Your third flight is 3 spaces, but you hit nothing, and then your fourth flight is only 1 space because you hit the paper, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10 to hit the border. So if you started on R8, it would have been 10 flights to get there. That's sort of the principle. And for me, for level 4 is where I moved away from building solutions directly alongside the case. I went across to do a sort of traditional sort of data table idea. So I've pulled in example 4 as a starting point, just pulling the XLOOKUP of example 4 from case column B to return column G. That's just giving me the starting cell. So that's a pretty common setup for pulling the case number so that you can run your data table on a separate sheet. And then I started off by similar idea to what Steyn just explained on level 3. So having an indirect function that references an input that's called library, that just pulls me onto the library tab. The next sort of the map that I mentioned when Renier was talking earlier is I also set up a map of ones and zeros, which is just where there are things that will make you stop. And this proved to be quite helpful for me, the way that I was sort of thinking about it. But basically, it's just, if the library value is blank, make that not so it flips around. So in other words, where it's not blank, give me ones or zeros with the sort of double negative here. And this is basically just ones and zeros wherever there's something, a book or a paper. And I could use this for then stops and things like that, where I wasn't having to track multiplication by 2 or by 4, because then you need to know it's a paper or a book. This just lets you know where you're stopping.
Sorry, just to add, so the double negative basically converts true and false to 1 or 0.
Yeah.
So I guess I just wanted to add that. So it's nice if you have numbers, because now you can count them, you can sum them, you can do all kinds of stuff. And something else that I just wanted to note is that I think good practice that you show there is if you go to the library tab. I think a lot of people want to always go and build their models and stuff outside in a separate sheet. But what's nice about this is you can visually see whether what you're doing is right. You don't have to flip to the library and back all the time.
Yeah.
You're actually on the library at that stage, and you can just check while you're writing that your references are right and that you're summing it up correctly. And another thing that I noticed when you showed the example was that for many of these, we can see that there's 2 flights, 4 flights, 3 flights, 1 flight. You could have done those manually. And I think a lot of people struggled with a complex model. And you could have actually, if you had 4 minutes or 5 minutes, you might have been able to get 6 or 7 of these out in that time manually, which is always a recommendation. And I saw even the champion went with a rand between on the second last level of the final case. So sometimes you just realize, okay, I don't have time, but maybe I can get a point or 2 that just edges me above the person next to me, which could put you in the final.
Yeah, good, great advice. I mean, if you sort of had the clarity of mind on the day, and you had, as you say, 4 or 5 minutes to go, and you're flying right, start with any case that's as close to AO as possible, and kind of just work backwards and just do them manually: 1 flight, 2 flights, 3 flights, whatever you can. And the manual points often are the make or break. The nice thing about visualization, I think I've shown this before, but the add-in that I use, which I don't think you can see the pop-up on the screen, but you can see the colors here.
We can see Arixel.
Can you see Arixel, the window?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can see it.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. So, I mean, I've like every time I talk about Arixel, it's amazing. But when I was testing the case, I've now I've set up my offset function. Like, am I doing the right thing? AG 15 to the end of the border. It looks good. Okay, cool. Happy. And then I did the same function, but on my stops tab. So I'm referencing the stops tab instead of the library tab here, and that's giving me the ones and zeros, which was helpful. The icons with the papers and the books is needed to calculate the multiplier if you needed that. But actually here we just needed stops, actually, just to know when we were stopping. So I didn't actually have to deal with that. And because I'm starting on the cell the starting cell, you could make an argument that you could offset by 1 column, and then you start on flight 1, but that's not that helpful if you needed to read a book or a paper on the first when you started. So if that was necessary, I was sort of thinking ahead, let me start on cell 0. But what I've done then is I've just sort of hard-coded the very first value is flight 0, and then the next one to the right is always flight 1. And then the question is that a book or a paper or not? And if it wasn't, then the next cell is still flight 1, and then still flight 1. And so this now became somewhat complex, I suppose.
Sorry, I just want to jump in there. So what I just wanted to notice there is the fact that, because I also did exactly the same. I also started with a 0 and a 1, and I also made them red. So I just wanted to say that that is good practice. That is international modeling speak for. This is a constant number. It's not attached to a function. So that someone who reads your case, as soon as I open it up, I knew that those were constants. I knew that they were static numbers, and that's exactly what I did. I also made them red so that I can remember that they are static and that they are constant. So very good practice there.
Yeah. And I find like I'm still slightly slower in these cases than like the top guys, globally. I think a lot of people will probably on the day not color that stuff in. But for me, just clarity of mind on what I'm doing, like I will still go and do that on the day. It just helps me remember exactly what I've done. And if I need to go and debug, it's like, these are hard-coded numbers, whatever. All right. So for the formula that I've run here, let's just ignore the first bit of the is blank function. I'll explain why I've done that later. But basically what I'm doing is we need to take the flight number that I've just come from. So in cell 3, the flight number is 1. If I hit a book or a paper, I need to add 1. If I hit a book or a paper on the previous one, then I need to add 1. And so there's quite a few. This is the point that I think you were making, Renier, at the start, is like the logic or the explanation of the case is relatively simple, but all of the different nuances and things that can happen can make this relatively complex. So one of the first things I did was I said, if the range that I've come before me, if I do the count, if I'm going to do this in RXL because it's going to be easier to show. So skip those bits. If the range that I've come from, so that's the range before me, and this is an expanding array. If the number of values in that array that is the same as the number I've just come from is greater than or equal to 3, it means I've hit my 3-cell limit and I need to add 1. All right, so that's a bit of a vague thing, sort of an abstract thing to get your head around. If I've gone, maybe let me see if I can find an example. Let's see if that happens. Whoops. Why is that? Oh, yeah. 51. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I guess that works there. So in this range, I started on 0. I've flown 1, 2, 3 cells without reading anything. Then my next cell has to be flight number 2, because I haven't hit anything in the first 3 cells. So that's flight number 1, 3 cells, and then flight number 2. So that means that I have means that this range there are 3 1s, and therefore I need to add 1. So I've got the true. So I'm adding 1. I'm on to flight number 2 there. Now, on flight number 2, I hit the book. Boom. That's a 1-cell movement. So I think if I show this range, I start here on R20. Flight 1 is 1, 2, 3. Flight 1, nothing red. Flight 2 is W. In column W, it's the book. That's flight 2. Then flight 3 is 1, 2, 3. Flight 4 is 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, etc. So that first count if greater than 3 is saying if I've had 3 cells with the same flight number, I need to add 1 because I'm hitting the 3-cell limit. And then the next part is to think about. Sorry, that was the 3-cell limit. Then if the previous cell that I was on is a book or a paper, I need to add 1 again. So if you hit a book or a paper, then the next cell is going to be a new flight because you're going to stop on the book or the paper. And so this, I guess, fairly complex build up and took me some time to sort of work through. Maybe there's better ways to do this, but sort of that's how I built it up. You got to kind of bake in the 3-cell limit, or you hitting a book, or you starting on, but you hard coding the 0 and the 1, because it doesn't matter if you start on a book, that's flight 0, etc. And then all I did is I just copied this whole formula across 40 columns so that I didn't have to try and cater for moving ranges. Sort of similar to your logic, Renier, of, I'm going down, so just put down 100 rows, just cater for it. And so the if is blank up the front just says, if I've kind of not hitting the spill range here, then don't do the 3-cell adding 1 all the time. Then just keep it the same as the value it was before. So if the cell above is blank, just keep it the same as the value it was before. And that means that for my data table, I can reference a very fixed reference point being the max of that range, rather than having to try and figure out where the end of the range was. So that was a bit of a manual hack on the day to say, like, simplify the thing, don't overcomplicate it, just cater for 40 slots. It can only be 40 slots long. And if you don't get there, just keep the value the same and then pick up the max.
I mean,
this is the data table that gets you the answers.
You didn't even need the max because you could have just referenced CQ.
Could have just done the last one.
So that's the nice thing about how you've built it, because in the way that I built it, I had to still figure out, okay, how do I now look up look it up where the end of the map is hit. So logically, this makes a lot more sense, and I think this is a lot more elegant or eloquent, I guess, or effective in that case. So very, very challenging actually. This is one of the. This is an example of what I've seen in much older cases where you had to do complex modeling and you had to keep track of lots of different things. What I like about your method as well is the fact that you've done the if. Maybe you can just step into that function again. But the summing it with one if, I think, is brilliant, because in some of these cases you could build it where you actually have 4, 5, 6 different ifs, and your function becomes so difficult that you can't debug it, and you've forgotten what you've done by the time you get to the end. Where this, you only have one if essentially, except for the initial if.
I split it into 2 rows. One where I track the moves and the other where I track the turns, which make the formula a bit more easier to debug and so.
Okay.
No, that makes sense. But I think all of us would have done it in a very similar vein. Another thing is I did mine going down the rows and not necessarily spilling by columns. But I think in this case it makes sense to work with columns because you are flying right. So visually, you're working in the same direction that Mkhulu is flying. So keep it simple.
Yeah, and then I mean level 5 conceptually is much the same. Level 5 says Mkhulu starts in a given cell and flies up. So, like, just conceptually, it feels very similar. Here, you're restricted to 5 flights, so you had to track only 5 flights. But I think if you use the offset function, and if you know directions on a map, you'll realize that going up and going left is very different to going down and going right, because it inverts the order of the range that you pull. And so that was like the sort of added complexity there. Example 5. So example 5, you're transposing from S14. No, sorry, that is refreshing. V39 up to the top. But if you feed this range to Excel, Excel's not reading it as V39 up to V2. It's V2 to V39. Excel always reads top left to bottom right. And so you had to then, an additional step here was to then invert this range. And so this is actually something that's becoming sort of fairly common to have to know how to do in these competitions. So if you just pull the range as a starting point, then a sort of common way to sort of invert that range is to take the index of the range. Index just says what value in the range do I want to pull, which number value. And then if you feed that the sequence function, sort of similar to what we did in level 1, you give it a sequence of however many columns there are in this range. And then you start with the number of columns. So you start at number 40 or whatever it is in this range. It's I actually could do Renier's thing and show you the little IntelliSense thing. Start at number 38, and then your step is -1. So then you're getting a sequence of 38, 37, 36, 35, 34, 33 down to 1. And what that's doing in the index function is saying, give me this range and give me the 38th value, then the 37th value, 36th value. And what you can see is that that just inverts the thing. So I go 0, 0, I go 0, 0, 0, 0 book paper, 0, 0, 0, 0 book paper. I've just flipped over the array.
I was wondering just now, can't you actually invert in the offset?
I guess if you did offset by number of rows and then kept the height the same, yeah, maybe.
So just go to your previous function.
This one.
Yeah. So I was wondering, like, where you actually have your height. So you are feeding -38. Okay. So
yeah, but see,
but it's still
the same, it's the same problem. It wouldn't work. Even if you could do the offset in two ways. You could offset by the number of rows and then give it a height, or you could start and then give it a negative height.
Either way, you need the index.
But either way, Excel is giving you a range of V2 to V39, not V39 to V2, and so that's why you need to invert it.
And this makes it very similar to Snap from last year, which was the final case last year, because Snap you also had to invert,
Correct.
and a lot of guys struggled with that one. So I think they were ready for this one because of Snap.
Yeah. So the inverting a range is quite a useful sort of thing to know about. And then I'm trying to think what did I do here? This is much the same as my stops function. So just where are the stops in this range? And I had to redo the stops because I couldn't use I could have pulled this with the offset and then invert it again, but I didn't have to invert again. I could just do the is it a value? And then much the same sort of process here to pull how many flights there were. The important thing here was to know that you had to filter the ranges for where the number of flight is less than or equal to 5, because you only had 5 flights in this question. And then in this one, you also had to build up the multiplier factor, so your icons and multiplier lookups. I didn't name those ranges. I don't know why I didn't. It was a bit of a silly thing to not do. Would have made life a lot easier. But these are the ranges and the multipliers. I felt like I was somewhat kind in setting up this table to say that if there was nothing, it gives you a multiplier of 1, because actually when you're doing this multiplier thing, you can literally just do a product. Like product just multiplies numbers together. So the product of all the values, as long as you keep the blanks at 1, then multiplying by 1 doesn't matter, and then you get the 2s and the 4s, and you multiply by the initial starting value from the case that was given, multiply by this product of all of these books and papers, and that gives you the answer that multiplies up. And the 131,072 is the sort of illustrative example that I gave in the question of where you start on V39. Flight 1, you keep the same OQ. Flight 2, you times 4. Flight 3, you times 2. Flight 4, you times 4. And then flight 5, you don't do anything. And so the that's where the 11072 comes from. And again, data table to give me the answers.
Yeah, very, very cool. And again, this is something that you could have used reduce for, but in this case, I think there's only about 5 people in the world that I know of that could keep track of all the steps and all the things So a lot better in my mind to build it out like this. And I think under pressure, unless you are very well practiced, it's just going to be too much to work through and too difficult to debug. But you can use a let and a lambda quite powerfully. And I guess, like I said, we'll probably see them do it once he does his walkthrough.
Yeah, I have no doubt.
Steyn, did you want to add anything? Did you have any different method or any easier method of doing this?
No, I basically did the same.
Okay, very similar.
So when you split it out into 2 steps, was it sort of similar to what I did? You just did it in 2 rows. Is that the thinking?
On this one, I had it in a column.
Sure. But sort of 2 steps, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. Let's maybe run through the last 2 bonuses and then we can wrap up. All right. So what was the longest flight path in any one direction that Mkhulu could fly without landing on a paper or book? Ignore the 3-cell flight limit, and he can start on a paper or book. So for this answer, I just went through I used my stops tab, and I guess sort of visually works out quite nicely here. But I did here, I guess, just sort of understanding that a flight from left to right and a flight from right to left is going to be the same distance. So I only had to check in one direction horizontally and in one direction vertically. But basically, this is quite a simple formula. I think if the value on my stops tab is not 1, then give me the value that let's do this here, the value that was coming before it to the left plus 1, otherwise give me 0. And the way that, I mean, the reason that works is if it's 1, it means you would have stopped there or started there. And so your very first cell is the cell after wherever there was a book or a paper. And so if you just then run this across the whole sheet, then I guess visually you could kind of see that the longest run is here on the horizontal path, which is basically this run over here. And I checked it vertically as well. So you do the same, just top to bottom. So you basically just reference the cell above you. And I think the longest run here was 22, which was this run here. And then actually to just pull the thing, I just did a max of the 2 blocks. What's the max number in the 2 blocks? And that gave me the 33. I saw 1 or 2 people answered 32 or 34 here. And I think it's just a question of whether you counted the book as cell number 1 instead of cell number 0, and then the first cell is number 1, or if you didn't stop, when you hit before a book, or on the book you stop before the book, kind of thing. So that was bonus D, and then bonus E. I must admit, I'm looking forward to some of the pros write down their really cool functions, but bonus E, I'm not ashamed at all to say I did this completely manually. I colored in the map to check where this was going. It took me about 5 minutes to do, I think, to check myself. But what I did is I just popped down all the arrows so that I had a track, and I literally sort of manually went, okay, going down from here is to there, and then going left is to there, and then going right again. And I guess the trick here on bonus E was that once you'd landed on an item, you like picked it up and it wasn't there anymore. So that was a bit of a trick, and interesting to see how the guys are going to think about that, because I think that was the part that was tripping me up. You can see I was trying to write like let formulas and stuff here, but it was not being successful. But so step 1 down 2, step 2 across 2 because you hit a paper, step 3 across 3 because that book's not there anymore. And that's the challenge, I think, from the formula. How the guy's going to handle that, going to be really interesting. Keeping track of the addresses of the values you've landed on and stuff. That's where my mind was going, but I couldn't get there, or at least I gave up before I got there. And so I did it pretty manually, and I got Steyn to double check my answers, and we did a very similar little pattern thing, and ultimately you end up in cell AA32 after those 50 moves. And that so that was just a pure manual attempt. Yeah, but if you managed to get that out in 30 minutes, then you would have got 1,250. But I think quite a few people on the day got close to 1,000 points on this, if I remember correctly. So it was a pretty strong showing. I think a couple of people have got over 1,000 points on this case, if I remember, on the day.
Yeah, I can't remember, but I think there was definitely there were some over 1,000.
I shouldn't say a few. There were one or two that got above 1,000. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Let me see. I think just below 1,000, but still amazingly impressive within half an hour. So yeah, good show. And I'm curious to see if one of our international competitors will be able to actually get full marks for this one, because they're in a different league. But this is, I think there are some nuances that could waste a lot of time. But yeah, I guess that wraps it up. Thank you guys again. Great case. Thanks, Jason. I think everyone loved it. I think it had, like I said, I really like the simple cases with very little explanations, but that tests you and I think there's a lot of interesting tips and tricks that you could use here to assist. In the end, it's just basically being able to keep track of data and being able to work in a logical order. I think which would have helped a lot. And then of course you would have had to know certain things like we said, indirect, how to invert an array using the index sequence. So there's a couple of tips, and then also splitting out text in specific ways where you have more than one character length, etc. So they were very interesting nuances. Very, very cool case. Thanks for that. Any closing thoughts from you guys? Are we good?
Yeah, all good. I hope whoever tackles it enjoys it.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening to us for the past hour and a bit. It's been fun, and if you listen to the end, thanks for that, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.